The last handful of dirt hit my son's casket when my daughter-in-law snapped, "Stop crying and take your junk." That night, she shoved papers in my face, telling me to sign my house away. Then my phone lit up with a text from a stranger. "Don't sign anything. I have proof your son didn't just die." From that moment, this 65-year-old woman started to stand back up, not for myself, but to make his killer pay with the one thing she truly loved. My name is Eleanor Brooks. I am 65 years old, a widow living in the high desert town of Westbridge, Colorado. And on this Tuesday, I was standing over a 6-foot hole in the ground, watching 2 men with shovels bury my only son, Daniel. The sky was a flat, unforgiving grey that pressed down on us. A cold wind bit at my cheeks, carrying the priest's droning words away as fast as he spoke them. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The scrape of the shovels on the hard earth was the only sound that felt real, a rhythmic, final punctuation mark. The few mourners who had come, neighbours and a cousin I hadn't seen in 10 years, shuffled their feet. They studied the grass, the horizon, the sleeves of their own coats anywhere but at my face, at the raw, swollen redness around my eyes. Standing beside me, though not really with me, was my daughter-in-law, Maddie. She was in her early 30s, tall and striking, poured into a black designer suit that looked more appropriate for a hostile takeover than a funeral. Her makeup was a flawless, waterproof mask. She wasn't grieving. She was annoyed. I'd watched her check the slim gold watch on her wrist 3 times in the last 5 minutes, and twice she had turned slightly, whispering impatiently into the smartphone clutched in her black-gloved hand. The priest finished. He nodded at me. It was time. My legs felt like they were moving through wet cement as I stepped forward. My hand shook so badly, the single white rose I held trembled violently. I bent down, my back screaming in protest, to place it on the dark, polished wood of the casket. Before I could straighten up, a voice cut through the cold. "Stop crying and take your junk." I froze. It was Maddie. Her voice was sharp, like ice chipping. She shoved a small, beige cardboard box into my chest, hard enough to make me stumble back. Daniel's personal effects from the hospital. I heard a few muffled gasps from the relatives behind me. I saw my cousin Martha's head snap toward us, her eyes wide. But then, just as quickly, she looked away, pretending she hadn't heard. A hot, stinging wave of shame washed over me, momentarily eclipsing the grief. My ears roared. I clutched the box. I was being too sensitive. I told myself. My son had just died. Her husband. She was hurting, too. She just had a different, harsher way of dealing with it. I swallowed the thick lump in my throat, forcing the tears back down. Back at the house, the air was suffocating, thick with the scent of lilies and the half-dozen casseroles people had brought. The living room was full of quiet murmurs, the rustle of dark suits. I sat in my armchair. The big one with the worn arms that Daniel always joked was the Queen's throne. I couldn't move. I couldn't eat. I just stared at the wall, at the framed photograph of Daniel in his college cap and gown, smiling so wide his eyes crinkled at the corners. Maddie, however, was in motion. She moved through the crowd, accepting hugs with a stiff pat on the back. But her eyes were flinty. I caught snippets of her conversations. "It's just too much for her," she'd say, nodding toward me. "Please don't let her touch any papers. She's not really lucid right now." When she spoke to the man from the funeral home, she pointed. She is going to need help with everything. She. Not Mom. Not Eleanor. Just she. A small, sharp sliver of wrongness cut through the thick fog of my sorrow. The last guest finally left around 8 o'clock. The silence they left behind was heavy, accusing. Maddie walked into the living room, kicked off her expensive heels, and tossed that cardboard box onto the coffee table. The sound made me jump. "Take all those little things of his down to the basement," she ordered, waving a hand toward the door. "I need the space." I stared at her, unable to form a word. She sighed, a put-upon sound, and picked at her perfect manicure. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice flat, all false sympathy gone. "We need to talk seriously about this house." I didn't answer. I felt myself lurch to my feet, my legs unsteady as a newborn colt's. I picked up the box, Daniel's watch, his wallet, a keychain. I stumbled toward my bedroom, clutching the junk to my chest. And as I closed the door, I heard it. From the kitchen, where my son's wife was standing. I heard the sound of a soft, relieved giggle. I leaned against the door, the cold wood pressing into my back. I was a problem. A piece of old furniture, a loose end. Just one more burden waiting to be tossed out. I didn't sleep. I just drifted in a grey fog of exhaustion and grief. The next morning, Maddie pushed open my bedroom door without knocking, a bright, false smile plastered on her face. She was holding a steaming mug and a thick sheaf of papers. "I brought you coffee, Mum," she chirped, setting the mug on my nightstand. "And I have some papers here. Just simple banking procedures, really. A power of attorney? It will make it so much easier for me to help you handle everything." I stared at the stack. My mind was too slow, too thick to even read the first line. Maddie didn't seem to expect me to. She pulled a glossy brochure from the pile and slid it onto my lap. "I also found the most wonderful place for you. Sunrise Meadows Residence." I looked at the picture. Smiling seniors playing cards on a perfectly green lawn. It looked sterile. Fake. "A home." "It's a private residence," she corrected smoothly. "And honestly, it's for the best. This house is just too dangerous for you alone. The stairs are so steep. And you know how you worry about the gas stove." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "They have someone there 24/7. Mom. Full-time care. You won't have to worry about a thing." I must have looked confused, because she laughed lightly. "Like yesterday, when Aunt Martha called. I hadn't spoken to Martha." "What? Oh, Eleanor," she said, shaking her head with fond exasperation. "I had to talk to her. You left a pot of water boiling on the stove. It nearly burned the house down." She turned to me, her eyes wide with concern. "You remember, don't you? The firefighters came. It was such a scare." My heart hammered. Firefighters. I would remember firefighters. No, that didn't happen. Maddie's smile tightened. "See, this is what I'm worried about. Dr. Evans even mentioned he was concerned about early-stage dementia at your last checkup. You're forgetting things that could be dangerous." Dr. Evans had said no such thing. He had said my blood pressure was excellent for 65, but her certainty was a physical force, pushing me down. Was I forgetting? Was the grief eating holes in my memory? That night, she brought me a small white pill. "Your new sleeping pills," she announced. "Dr. Evans prescribed them to help you get through this awful stage. I didn't want it, but I was too tired to argue. I swallowed it. The next morning, I woke up feeling like my head was full of wet cotton. The clock said it was almost noon. I had lost hours. The world was blurry, the grief muted. But so was everything else. While I was slumped in the armchair, still trying to clear my head, I watched Maddie bustling around Daniel's old desk in the corner. She pulled out drawers, shuffled files. Finally, she emerged with a stack of credit card statements, her face a mask of weary responsibility. "This is worse than I thought," she sighed, sinking onto the sofa opposite me. "Daniel, he left an incredible amount of debt, tens of thousands of dollars on these cards." She held them up. "I don't know how we're going to pay this. Eleanor, as his wife, I'm responsible. But..." She looked around the living room. "We have to sell the house. It's the only way to cover it." That tiny, sharp sliver of wrongness from the funeral pierced the fog. But Daniel, my son, was meticulous. He balanced his checkbook to the penny every Sunday night. He used to lecture me about the evils of carrying a balance. "Daniel hated debt," I whispered, the words thick on my tongue. "He always paid his cards off, every month." Maddie's eyes hardened for a split second before they filled with tears. Her entire demeanor changed. Her shoulders slumped. A sob caught in her throat. "I didn't want to tell you," she choked out, one hand dropping to her flat stomach. "I didn't want to add to your pain." "Tell me what—" "I'm pregnant," she whispered, looking up at me through wet lashes. "I found out the week before." "Before?" She took a ragged breath. "I don't want to sell this house. Eleanor, it's his home. But I can't bring a baby into the world with all this debt hanging over us. I can't be homeless." Guilt, sharp and overwhelming, flooded me. A baby. Daniel's baby. My grandchild. I was being selfish, clinging to bricks and mortar while this poor, pregnant widow was trying to protect her child. I almost reached for the pen. But that night, the fog from the pill lifted just enough. The image of Daniel at his desk, frowning at his ledger, wouldn't leave me. Around 3 a.m, I pulled myself out of bed. The house was silent. I crept into Daniel's old room, which Maddie hadn't touched yet. I went to his bookshelf, pulled out the copy of Moby Dick, and reached behind the other books. There it was, his dark blue financial ledger. I opened it. My hands were shaking. I ran my finger down the last entry, dated just 2 days before his before. Every card listed, every balance. Paid, paid, paid. A zero balance. He had no debt. I closed the book, the lie settling like a stone in my stomach. I put the ledger back, pushed it deep into the shadows, and crept back to my room. I would not be signing anything. Not tomorrow. Not for a few more days. I needed to think. I stalled for 2 more days, citing headaches and watery eyes that made the fine print impossible to read. Maddie's patience was wearing visibly thin. Her smiles were brittle, her voice tight with an irritation she barely bothered to hide. She had just placed the thick stack of papers on the kitchen table for the 4th time, along with a heavy pen, her expression making it clear this was not a request. "Eleanor, we have to get this done today. The bank needs the authorization." My hand was actually shaking as I reached for the pen. I felt trapped. The lie about the baby, the lie about the debt, it was all a cage. My fingers brushed the cold plastic. At that exact second, My old flip phone, resting on the counter, buzzed. I never got text messages. Maddie sighed, tapping her acrylic nails on the granite. Just sign it. You can check your phone later. But I picked it up. A message from a number I didn't recognize. My thumb fumbled with the button. Don't sign. Daniel didn't die from a stroke. Call me if you really want to know. My blood ran cold. My breath caught in my throat. Another buzz. A picture loaded, grainy and small on the tiny screen. It looked like a computer monitor. I squinted, holding it close. It was a line of medical text. Patient Brooks. Daniel. Cause of admission overdose. Respiratory failure. What is it? Maddie snapped, leaning over. I fumbled the phone, dropping it shut. Nothing. Just spam. I pushed my chair back, my knees wobbling. I need some air. The medication. It's making me dizzy. I didn't wait for her reply. I walked, as steadily as I could, to the back porch and slid the glass door shut, locking it behind me. My heart was a frantic bird against my ribs. Another message came through. My name is Dr. Logan Pierce, ER doc, the night Daniel was admitted. I was forced to be quiet. I can't anymore. I stared at the name. Respiratory failure, not a stroke. The official report, the one Maddie had shown me, had said massive cerebral hemorrhage. A stroke. Quick. Tragic. No questions asked. Fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but beneath it, something else flickered a terrible, burning hope. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just a sudden tragedy. I pressed the call button. It rang once, then clicked. Mrs. Brooks. The voice was young, male, and sounded terrified. Dr. Pierce. What? What was that picture? What do you mean? Not a stroke. Please, Mrs. Brooks, I don't have much time, he said, his voice low and rushed. Your son didn't present like a stroke victim. He was brought in with acute respiratory distress. His blood work was off the charts. A massive level of a prescription sedative. My initial chart note said, overdose possible, pending further tests. Overdose? I leaned against the house, the rough brick biting into my back. Yes. But a few hours later, after I was spoken to, the official diagnosis was changed. The chart was amended to stroke. All my original notes were buried. Spoken to by who, why. There was a pause. I heard him take a deep breath. A lawyer from an insurance corporation showed up. He strongly implied my career would be over if I misdiagnosed a high-profile case. He said I was young, I was seeing ghosts, and that the family wanted closure, not a messy investigation. Mrs. Brooks. Your son had a very large, very recent life insurance policy. The sole beneficiary is his wife. Maddie. I kept a copy of the original system log. The doctor continued, his voice gaining a desperate urgency. I kept the intake medication chart, too. Mrs. Brooks. Just before your son coded, his wife gave the attending nurse a pill bottle from her purse. Said it was one of his regular sedatives and that he'd missed his dose. The nurse. She administered it, thinking she was helping. It wasn't on his orders. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold concrete of the porch. My hand, the one holding the phone, was trembling so hard I could barely hear. If you ask me, Dr. Pierce said, his voice dropping to a whisper that cut me to the bone. I believe someone intentionally gave him that overdose. and the hospital and the insurance company helped cover it up to avoid a lawsuit and a payout investigation. I couldn't speak. I just made a small, choking sound. Mrs. Brooks, you cannot tell her you spoke to me. The people behind this, Maddie is just one part of it. I'm calling from a burner phone. I can't be traced to this. Not yet. If you can, if you feel safe, meet me tomorrow, 10 o'clock. The Grindhouse Cafe on Main Street. I'll be in a corner booth. The line clicked dead. I sat there, frozen. For how long, I don't know. The cold of the porch seeped into my bones, but it was nothing compared to the ice in my veins. Intentionally, finally, I pulled myself up. I looked through the glass of the sliding door, back into my own kitchen. Maddie was no longer at the table. She was pacing by the far window, her back to me, talking on her own phone. She was laughing. It was a bright, genuine laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from her in months. As I watched, she turned, and her voice carried through the thin glass, sharp and clear. "It's fine. Just get the transfer papers ready," she said to whoever was on the line. "I'll make sure she signs by tomorrow. Trust me. She's in no condition to argue." I walked back into the kitchen, the roar in my ears louder than any sound in the room. I let my shoulders slump, my whole body sag, as if the short walk to the porch had drained the last of my strength. "You're right, Maddie," I whispered. I let my voice quaver. It's just too much for me." I looked at the papers on the table, then at her, my eyes pleading. "I'm so tired. Can't this wait? Just a few days. You handle everything for now. I trust you." The relief that washed over her face was a physical thing, like a muscle unclenching. "Of course. Mum," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You just rest." That night, she brought me the small white pill and a glass of water. "This will help you sleep," she said. I took it, closing my hand around it. "Thank you, dear." I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and turned on the faucet, letting the water run hard. I looked at the pill in my palm. My hand was steady. I dropped it into the toilet and flushed. From the cabinet. I took my old bottle of one-a-day vitamins and swallowed one instead. The next morning, I made a show of rubbing my eyes, complaining of fogginess. But the thick, wet cotton that had filled my head for days was finally gone. I had 48 hours. While Maddie was in the shower, her music blaring, I moved. The stack of papers was on the hall table, waiting. I pulled out my old flip phone and, shielding the screen to hide the light, I opened the camera. The click of the shutter sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house, but Maddie couldn't hear. I photographed every single page, the durable power of attorney, giving her full control, the application for legal guardianship, citing my inability to manage my own affairs, and the last one, the one that made my blood freeze, a cognitive capacity assessment form. It was already filled out, detailing severe memory lapses, disorientation, and emotional volatility. It was just waiting for a signature. At the bottom, the typed name of the attending physician read Dr. Holden Marsh. I had never heard of him in my life. I told Maddie I needed to go to the bank to get a small document notarized. She was so pleased by my show of handling things that she barely questioned it. At 9:58, I walked into the Grindhouse Cafe. I spotted him in the back booth. Dr. Logan Pierce looked even younger in person, barely older than Daniel, with the haunted eyes of someone who hadn't slept in a week. Mrs. Brooks. He slid a manila envelope across the table. I shouldn't be here. I opened it. Inside were printouts, real paper. This is the original system log, he said, his finger tapping the first page. 7:14 p.m. Diagnosis overdose possible. And here, he pointed to another line, 2:36 a.m. Log access by admin legal debt. Northgate Assurance. Northgate Assurance, I whispered. That's Daniel's insurance. They were in the system before he was even officially pronounced dead, Logan said, his voice shaking with anger. And here, 2:40 a.m. Amended diagnosis. Massive cerebral hemorrhage. They buried it. He swallowed, looking around the cafe nervously. There's more. That wasn't the first time he'd been in. He came to the ER about 3 weeks before he died. He was dizzy, confused. Said he felt all mixed up. I remember, I said, a new, cold memory surfacing. He confided in me, Logan said, lowering his voice. He said his wife was giving him some new sleep supplements because he was overworked, but they made him feel terrible. Foggy. He thought it was just stress. Maddie, insisting on preparing Daniel's pill organizer every Sunday, clucking her tongue. He's just so forgetful. She'd always say, Daniel. On the phone 2 weeks ago, his voice slow and heavy. My head's all muddled. Mum? Must be working too many hours. It wasn't overwork. It was a rehearsal. What can we do? I asked, my voice flat, the grief hardening into something else. I can't fight Northgate alone. They'll ruin me, Logan said. But I have a friend. Her name is Rebecca Cole. She's a lawyer. She specializes in insurance fraud, runs a small firm. She's not on anyone's payroll. She's waiting for us. Now. Rebecca Cole's office was small, crammed with file boxes and smelling of old paper. She was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She didn't offer coffee. She just listened, spreading my photographs and Logan's printouts across her desk. She was silent for a full minute after we finished. Then she looked at me, her gaze so intense it felt like a physical weight. Mrs. Brooks, I need you to understand what this is. This is not just fraud. We have a falsified death record. We have a pattern of suspicious medication, corroborated by a physician. We have the beneficiary, Maddie, actively trying to seize your assets. She tapped my photo of the guardianship application using a fraudulent medical assessment. If she deliberately overdosed your son for that insurance policy and is now trying to have you declared incompetent to steal your home, we are not talking about Jian Lan. We are talking about manslaughter, possibly first-degree murder. The word hung in the air. Murder. We can't go to the police, Rebecca continued, her voice sharp and pragmatic. Not yet. Northgate's lawyers will tear Logan apart, and Maddie will paint you as a grieving, delusional old woman. Which is, of course, exactly the picture she is trying to create. She leaned forward. So, we let her. Logan, you go back to the hospital. Be scared, but keep your eyes open. I will start digging into Dr. Holden Marsh and Northgate Assurance. And Eleanor, you have the most difficult job of all. What is it? You go home. You become the confused, fading widow she wants you to be. You're scared of the papers. You forget names. You agree with her, but you forget to sign. You will let her get more and more confident, more and more frustrated. We need her to overplay her hand. We need her to push Dr. Marsh. We need to catch her in the act of building the cage she's trying to put you in. I walked out of that office, feeling like I'd aged 10 years and shed 20. When I returned home, Maddie was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, tapping her foot. "You were gone for 3 hours," she snapped. "The bank doesn't take 3 hours." I let my eyes go wide and vacant. I fumbled with my keys, dropping them on the floor. "Oh," I mumbled, bending down slowly. I'm so sorry, dear. I think I got a little lost on the way back." The irritation on her face vanished, replaced by that sickening, predatory look of control. "Oh, Mum," she sighed, putting an arm around my shoulder. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You just can't manage alone anymore. Don't you worry. I'll take care of everything." I let her lead me to the armchair. "Yes, dear," I whispered, sinking into the cushions. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." I let her think the prey was caught. My performance began. I became the frail, confused woman Maddie needed me to be. I would stand in the hallway, looking lost, until she asked what I needed. "Oh," I'd murmur. I was looking for the kitchen." I asked her the same questions repeatedly. "Is today Tuesday or Wednesday? Dear, what is this little white pill for again?" The more I faded, the more confident Maddie became. Her manufactured concern was replaced by an undisguised, arrogant pity. She grew careless. She started taking calls in the living room while I napped in my armchair. "No, she's completely slipping." I heard her boast to someone, her voice bright with achievement. "She asked me 3 times what my name was this morning. This whole process is getting so much easier." She had no idea my old smartphone, the one Daniel had insisted I keep, was wedged deep between the seat cushions, its microphone silently recording every word. On Rebecca's advice, I started complaining about feeling nervous. "Maddie, I feel so exposed here," I whispered, wringing my hands. "I keep thinking I hear people at the door. I read about those new doorbells, the ones with cameras." Maddie, thrilled by a practical demonstration of my paranoia, ordered one immediately. She thought I wanted to watch for delivery trucks. She didn't know Rebecca had walked me through the setup, linking the high-definition feed to a secure cloud account she controlled. It wasn't just a doorbell. It was a wide-angle camera aimed perfectly at the front door, the hall table, and anyone who stood there to talk, sign for a package, or exchange an envelope. Then came the day of my assessment. Maddie announced I'd be using a wheelchair for the trip, insisting I was too unsteady. "It's just for safety, Mum." The address she drove to wasn't a hospital. Riverside Behavioral was a small, dusty clinic in a depressing strip mall on the outskirts of town. Before we left, Rebecca had stopped by to check on me, and in doing so, had adjusted the cushion on the rented wheelchair. A tiny, high-fidelity digital recorder was now nestled in the foam, right beneath me. When we arrived, Maddie parked me in the hallway. "I just need to speak to Dr. Marsh about the billing," she said, patting my shoulder. "You just rest here." She stepped into his office, leaving the door slightly ajar. She thought I was deaf as well as demented. The recorder missed nothing. "She's declining faster than we thought," I heard Maddie whisper. "We need this finalized." My fee is for an assessment, Ms. Brooks. A man's tired voice grumbled. And your extra fee, Maddie hissed back, her voice suddenly like steel, is for a specific result. I am paying for a moderate dementia diagnosis. Today, or I stop paying altogether. There was a heavy sigh. Fine. Moderate cognitive decline. I'll have the report ready. When he called me in, I played my part beautifully. Dr. Holden Marsh, a man who looked like he'd slept in his suit, asked me who the president was. I told him I thought it was Mr. Reagan. But as he scribbled, I looked him dead in the eye. My son Daniel, he hated liars, I said, my voice suddenly clear and cold. He always said that a man who takes money to tell a lie, well, he's already sold everything he has. I watched the doctor's hand freeze, just for a second, before he continued writing. That night, feeling victorious after the assessment, Maddie was relaxed. I decided to push my luck. I feel so awful. Maddie, I murmured, staring at the floor. All that. Debt. You. Pregnant. And having to worry so. I just feel so guilty having this big house. Don't worry about the debt. Eleanor, she said dismissively. But who could he have owed? I pressed, faking a confused frown. It must be a terrible burden. She finally snapped. It's just a business loan. Okay. This man, Vince, he's a lender. He's impatient. But he'll be paid as soon as the house and the insurance clear. The way her jaw tightened on the name Vince told me he was no banker. He was a threat. A few nights later, Maddie handed me my pills. As I reached for the small paper cup, my hand trembled violently, knocking the pills onto the checkered kitchen floor. Oh, goodness, I'm so clumsy, I cried, as Maddie bent down with a sigh of exasperation, complaining about the mess. I palmed 2 of the small, white, unscored tablets and slipped them deep into the pocket of my robe. The next day, Logan came by, pretending to drop off medical forms. I passed him the pills in a tissue. Rebecca had the lab results within 24 hours. They were not my sleeping pills. They were not anti-anxiety pills. They were a powerful, restricted antipsychotic, the kind given to severely agitated patients in locked wards, the kind that, when taken with my actual prescription, could easily trigger respiratory failure. Rebecca sent the findings to a private investigator, Malik Rowe. He traced the prescription. It hadn't been written for me. It had been filled, illegally, using my insurance identification number, but the name on the original script belonged to a patient who had died 6 months prior. Maddie wasn't just gaslighting me. She was actively using my identity to procure the very weapon she'd likely used on my son. I sat in my armchair that night, the house silent. I was walking a tightrope over an abyss. I had no doubt now. If I slipped, if my performance wavered for even a second, Maddie wouldn't wait for a legal guardianship. She would just increase the dose. I, too, would have a sudden, tragic stroke. That night, I packed a small bag with essentials and my passport, and I hid it under the bed. I had to see this through, but I would not be cornered. With Dr. Marsh's fraudulent report in hand, Maddie's transformation was complete. She dropped all pretense of kindness. She was no longer a daughter-in-law. She was a warden. The small allowance of cash I used for the pharmacy and groceries vanished. It's all being managed through the estate account now. Eleanor, she said breezily, tapping her phone. You don't need to worry your head about money. Then, my mother's porcelain figurines disappeared from the mantelpiece. My late husband's silver pocket watch, which I kept in the desk drawer, was gone. The funeral cleanup crew must have taken them. She lied flatly when I tearfully asked. You know how those people are. You should have let me pack them away. She was selling my life, piece by piece, before the house was even listed. One afternoon, she walked in and didn't even bother to sit down. She stood over my armchair, a look of finality on her face. I have good news. Your room at Sunrise Meadows is ready. You'll be moving in tomorrow. She smiled, a thin, triumphant slash. Everything is taken care of. I've already paid the first month's deposit. It was not a discussion. It was a verdict. This was the moment Rebecca had warned me about. I let my face crumple. I let out a small, terrified gasp, my hands flying to my mouth. Tomorrow. But my things? I'm not ready. You don't need to be ready, Mum, she said, her voice softening into that sickening, patronizing tone. They have everything you need. You just need to rest. I let the fight drain out of me, as if a string had been cut. I nodded, my shoulders slumping in defeat. Yes. I suppose you're right. I am. So tired. Maddie beamed. She had finally broken me. She had won. What she didn't know was that Rebecca had spent the last week on the phone with an inspector from the state's Adult Protective Services. My name was already on a file, flagged for suspected financial exploitation and medical abuse. Sunrise Meadows was nothing like the brochure. The vibrant greens and smiling faces were a lie. The real place smelled of boiled cabbage and disinfectant. It was old. The paint was peeling, and the hallways were lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs. Residents, most of them silent, were parked in wheelchairs in a dim lounge, staring blankly at a game show blaring on a wall-mounted television. This was not a residence. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. I was put in a small, cramped room with 2 beds. My roommate was a tiny woman with sharp, bright eyes named Ruth. She watched me as the orderly left. You're new, she stated, not unkindly. You get visitors. My daughter-in-law? I stammered. Ruth grunted. Well, watch yourself. They like the ones with no visitors best. Less paperwork when things go wrong. She gestured with a thin, knobby finger toward the hallway. Their kids sign the papers, transfer the assets, and poof. She snapped her fingers. Gone. They just leave them here to... Wait. It's convenient. My heart ached for this woman, but her words were a cold comfort. I was exactly where I needed to be. That evening, Maddie arrived to sign the final medical directives. I watched from my bed, pretending to be drowsy. She has terrible anxiety, Maddie told the head nurse, a weary-looking woman named Brenda. She needs her sleeping pills, the strong ones her doctor prescribed. Just give her a high dose. She gets agitated at night. The nurse glanced at Maddie, then at me. We'll have to see what our staff doctor says. No, Maddie insisted, her voice sharp. Her doctor already approved it. Here is the bottle. She slid the illegal, unlabeled pills across the counter. Just give them to her. It's on my authority as her medical proxy. But Inspector Davies from APS had already spoken to Brenda. The nurse nodded, took the bottle, and said, Of course, Ms. Brooks. I'll take care of it. The moment Maddie left the building, Brenda placed the bottle in a plastic bag, labelled it with my name and the date, and locked it in the medication office, marked for APS collection. My new robe, a gift from Logan, felt heavy. He had sewn the tiny digital recorder into the hem of the pocket. For the next 3 days, I was the perfect resident. I sat quietly. I ate my pureed food. And I listened. I would doze in my wheelchair near the nurse's station, the recorder running. I heard them complaining about Maddie's incessant calls. She called again. Brenda's voice, tired and frustrated, demanding to know if Mrs. Brooks had been calmed down. She keeps telling me to up the dose, that I'm not giving her enough. What does she want? To put her in a coma? Outside these walls, the rest of the plan was clicking into place. Rebecca had been informed by her investigator, Malik, that the loan shark, Vince, was turning up the heat. He was calling Maddie 10 times a day, sending text messages threatening to visit the old lady himself. He wanted his money. Maddie, squeezed between her debts and the final payout, was getting desperate. She was making mistakes, getting louder, sloppier. Rebecca set the final part of the trap. She and Inspector Davies scheduled a surprise facility-wide inspection of Sunrise Meadows, citing an anonymous tip about medication abuse. They scheduled it for Thursday at 2 o'clock. The exact time Maddie had told the nurses she would be arriving to take her mother-in-law to a follow-up exam. She was walking right into it. On Thursday, at 2 o'clock on the dot, Maddie swept into the drab foyer of Sunrise Meadows. She was wearing a sharp navy blue pantsuit, her hair pulled back, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. She looked every bit the capable, grieving professional. She found me in the lounge, sitting in my wheelchair, and right beside me was Inspector Davies, a clipboard in his lap, looking mild-mannered and slightly bored. "Ah, Ms. Brooks," he said, standing up. "Inspector Davies, Adult Protective Services, just a routine check." Maddie put on her most careworn expression. "Oh, thank goodness." She sighed, putting a hand on my shoulder. I flinched, as rehearsed. "Inspector, I'm so glad you're here. I am at my wit's end. She's becoming a danger to herself. She barely recognizes me." She leaned in conspiratorially. "We absolutely must increase her medication. And the guardianship papers. They're taking forever. She needs to be protected." "I see," Davies said, nodding sympathetically. He played the part of a tired bureaucrat perfectly. "It's always the paperwork, isn't it? Do you have any of her medical evaluations with you? It might help speed things up on our end." "Of course." Maddie, brimming with self-assurance, unzipped her portfolio. She was so proud of her work. She pulled out a copy of Dr. Holden Marsh's fraudulent assessment. "Here, you can see for yourself. Moderate cognitive decline." Davies took the paper and scanned it. "This is very thorough. What's this note here in the margin?" Maddie's smile faltered. She hadn't realized there was a note. I saw her lean in, her eyes narrowing. Written in blue ink was Holden's hurried handwriting. Guarantee guardianship within 30 days per her request. In that instant, Inspector Davies's entire demeanor changed. The mild-mannered mask dropped, replaced by cold authority. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice like flint. "I am here today to execute a warrant to investigate allegations of medication abuse and elder exploitation." He signaled to 2 uniformed officers who had just entered the building. "We will be seizing all medication, charts, and visitor logs related to Eleanor Brooks. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me to the director's office to answer a few questions. What? Maddie's voice was a sharp squeak. You can't. I am her medical proxy. That's what we're here to discuss. In the small, cramped office, Maddie's composure shattered. Davies placed a plastic bag on the desk. Inside was the lab report from Logan's pills. Can you explain this? Ms. Brooks. Our lab confirmed the pills you've been supplying to the nursing staff are not sleeping pills. They are a restricted antipsychotic, one with a black box warning for respiratory depression in elderly patients. The same pills found in your husband's preliminary tox screen. Maddie went white as chalk. That's a lie. I don't know what that is. Then maybe you can explain this. Davies pressed a button on a small recorder. We heard the nurse's voice. She keeps telling me to up the dose. What does she want? To put her in a coma? Maddie lunged for her phone. I need my lawyer. She shrieked. Davies let her. She scrambled into the hallway, her hands shaking so badly she could barely dial. She thought she was out of earshot. Vince! She half sobbed into the phone. They're here, APS. They're investigating. They know about the pills. Her panic was met with a low growl I could hear even from the office. An APS officer, standing by the door, was recording her entire call. You stupid. Vince's voice roared. You get that money, you get it, or I'm not talking to you. I'm coming to talk to the old woman myself. You hear me? While Maddie was imploding at the nursing home, Rebecca Cole was at the county courthouse. She filed an emergency ex parte motion to suspend the guardianship proceedings and freeze all of my assets, including the house. She attached everything Logan's original log, the lab report on the pills, the recording of Maddie and Dr. Marsh, and the brand new recording of Maddie's frantic call to Vince. The judge, seeing the immediate, credible threat, didn't hesitate. He signed the order. The hearing was set for 48 hours from then, and, most importantly, he ruled that I was to be immediately removed from Sunrise Meadows and placed in the temporary protective custody of a neutral third party. An ambulance, ostensibly for a transfer, was already on its way to take me to Logan's home, under the guise of an independent medical evaluation. Maddie, having been dismissed by Davies, found her world collapsing. Her proxy status was void. The house sale was frozen, desperate. She drove straight to my house, probably to destroy evidence or find assets. She found only new locks on the doors, installed by Rebecca's locksmith that morning. The new doorbell camera recorded it all. It was not a pretty sight. She pounded on the door, her professional mask gone, her face a contortion of pure rage. You old! She screamed at the camera, at the empty house. You think you're smart, you ungrateful old hag. That house is mine. The neighbours, drawn by the noise, peered out their windows, watching her unravel on my front porch. That night, I sat in Logan's quiet guest room. It was the first time I had felt truly safe in weeks. Rebecca came by, her face tired but energized. It's all in motion, she said. She's trapped, and she's panicking, and I have one more piece of good news. I looked at her, bracing myself. Dr. Holden Marsh contacted the district attorney's office this afternoon, she said, a rare, thin smile touching her lips. He says his conscience has been bothering him. He's terrified of Maddie, and even more terrified of Northgate. He's offering his full, unvarnished testimony in exchange for a deal. The Westbridge County Courthouse was packed. I recognized my neighbours, their faces a mixture of curiosity and pity. I saw the strained, pale faces of two nurses from Sunrise Meadows, including Brenda. And at the front, Maddie sat beside a slick-looking man in an expensive suit, her expression a mask of offended dignity. I sat at the parallel table with Rebecca. I had taken the time to pin my silver hair back neatly. I wore my best navy blue dress. I was not the trembling, hollowed-out woman from the cemetery. I was Eleanor Brooks, and I was here for my son. Maddie's lawyer, Mr. Kincaid, went first. He was smooth. He painted a picture of a beloved matriarch, tragically undone by grief. He described me as a woman of advanced years, struggling to separate reality from fantasy, lost in a fog of sorrow. He listed the incidents Maddie had lovingly documented: my getting lost on the way home from the bank, my forgetting the gas stove, my inability to manage my own finances. It was a masterful performance, portraying Maddie as the dutiful, heartbroken daughter-in-law, desperately trying to protect a woman who was a danger to herself. Then it was Rebecca's turn. She stood, and the air in the room seemed to crackle. She was all business. "Your Honor," she began. "Mr. Kincaid paints a moving picture. Now I would like to introduce the facts." One by one, she laid the foundation. The printout of the hospital's system log, showing a 7:14 p.m. diagnosis of overdose possible, and a 2:40 a.m. amended diagnosis of massive cerebral hemorrhage, right after a login from Northgate Assurance. The lab report, identifying the pills Maddie provided to me at home and to the staff at Sunrise Meadows as a potent antipsychotic. And then, the audio. "We would like to play a recording, Your Honor, of a conversation between Ms. Brooks and her hand-picked evaluator, Dr. Holden Marsh." The speakers hissed. We heard Maddie's voice. "Your extra fee is for a specific result. I am paying for a moderate dementia diagnosis. Today." Maddie's lawyer shot to his feet, objecting, but it was all too late. The judge, his face grim, overruled him. Rebecca called Dr. Holden Marsh to the stand. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. He confessed it all. He admitted Maddie had sought him out, offering him $5,000 in cash to find me legally incompetent. "She said it was to smooth the guardianship process," he mumbled, staring at his hands. "To help her." Next, Rebecca called Dr. Logan Pierce. He was nervous, but his voice was clear and steady as he detailed Daniel's arrival in the ER. He described the symptoms: pinpoint pupils, shallow breathing, unresponsiveness that were classic signs of an overdose, not a stroke. "I was pressured by hospital administration and an attorney from Northgate to change my diagnosis," he said, looking at the judge. "But this was my original, time-stamped note." He read it aloud. "Patient non-responsive. Suspected severe sedative overdose. Wife's account of events is inconsistent." The room was dead silent, but Rebecca wasn't finished. "Your Honor, the defense has built its case on my client's supposed emotional instability following her son's death. I would like to play 2 short video clips, time-stamped, from my client's doorbell camera." The large monitor in the courtroom flickered to life. The first clip was from the day of the funeral. We saw the mourners walking away from the grave. We saw Maddie, her face twisted in rage, shove the cardboard box at me. We heard her voice, sharp and clear, "Stop crying and take your junk." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. The second clip was from a week later, showing a delivery man at the door. It showed Maddie snatching the delivery slip from my hand, ripping it in two. "She doesn't handle papers," Maddie snapped at the confused man, pointing at me. "Give it to me." Rebecca paused the video on Maddie's furious face. She turned to the defense table, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "Ms. Brooks," she said. "Mr. Kincaid claims you were acting only out of love and concern for your mother-in-law." She looked Maddie dead in the eyes. "Is this how a loving wife, a grieving widow, and a concerned daughter-in-law behaves just hours after burying her husband, Maddie, who had been shrinking in her chair, suddenly shot upright? Her face was bright red, the mask completely gone. "She wouldn't stop," Maddie shrieked, pointing a finger at me. "She just kept crying and crying. What good was that? I had to do everything I had to handle it." Kincaid grabbed her arm, hissing, "Maddie, shut up." But the damage was done. The entire courtroom was staring at her, no longer with pity, but with a cold, dawning horror. People were whispering, turning their backs to her. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order, order in this court." He waited until the room was silent, his gaze fixed on Maddie. He looked at Rebecca, then at the pile of evidence. "This hearing is concluded," he said, his voice booming. "The petition for guardianship is not only dismissed, it is dismissed with extreme prejudice. Based on the evidence presented here today, this court is ordering a full criminal investigation into Ms. Madison Brooks and her associates for potential insurance fraud, conspiracy, and severe elder abuse." Maddie looked like she'd been struck by lightning. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am issuing an immediate, permanent restraining order. Ms. Brooks is to have no contact of any kind with Mrs. Eleanor Brooks, effective immediately." Maddie just stared, her mouth open. Her lawyer, Mr. Kincaid, had gone a sickly shade of grey. He was already packing his briefcase, refusing to look at his client. The restraining order was a shield, but it wasn't a sword. I was no longer on the defense. It was time to attack. The day after the hearing, Rebecca and I filed a massive civil suit against both Madison Brooks and Northgate Assurance for conspiracy to defraud, wrongful death, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We weren't just asking for the insurance money, we were asking for punitive damages for the cover-up and the nightmare they had put me through. The ripple effect from the hearing was immediate. The APS investigation into Sunrise Meadows widened, and my case was the stone dropped in the pond. It turned out Ruth was right. They uncovered a pattern. Nearly a dozen residents had been admitted under fast-track guardianships, their assets liquidated by family members within weeks. My story was leaked to the press. The Westbridge Chronicle ran a front-page article. They used a photo of me from the hearing, looking composed and determined. The headline was damning, but it was the quote they pulled that did the most damage. "My daughter-in-law told me to stop crying and take your junk." The article quoted me. "For weeks, I did. Then I stopped crying, and I decided to make her pay." The public outrage was palpable. Maddie, who had been working in public relations, was fired by her firm within 24 hours of the article hitting the stands. At the same time, the criminal investigation was closing in on her from another angle. The loan shark, Vince, was facing his own investigation for money laundering, seeing a chance to save himself. He flipped. He handed the district attorney his entire text history with Maddie. It was a gold mine. Texts from her bragging about getting the old woman into a home, complaining that the insurance payout is taking too long, And his replies, threatening to break her legs if he wasn't paid. It painted a perfect, sordid picture of her motive. Maddie, now jobless, friendless, and facing both a civil suit and a criminal indictment, grew desperate. She didn't dare contact me directly. Instead, she reached out to my cousin, Martha, the one who had looked away at the funeral. Martha called me, her voice thick with Maddie's crocodile tears. "Eleanor, Maddie is... She's so remorseful," Martha pleaded. "She says it was all a misunderstanding. She'll sign the house back over to you, free and clear, no contest. She'll give you everything if you just withdraw the lawsuits. She says she can't go to jail." I listened to Martha's entire, pathetic speech. When she was finished, I was silent for a moment. "Tell Rebecca," I said, and hung up. Rebecca's official reply to Maddie's lawyer was a single, curt sentence. "On the day Ms. Brooks told my client to stop crying and take your junk, she selected her own terms. We will see her in court." The final domino to fall was Northgate Assurance, faced with a billion-dollar lawsuit, a PR nightmare, and their own employee's name in a criminal investigation. Their lawyers called Rebecca. They, too, wanted a deal. They would publicly disavow the lawyer who had pressured Logan. They would cooperate fully with the DA's criminal case against Maddie. They would, in essence, throw her under the bus to save the company. Rebecca, a shark, negotiated. They would do all that, and they would settle my civil suit for the full policy amount, plus a substantial private settlement. With Northgate's full cooperation, the hospital administration moved just as fast. The legal department employee who had altered Daniel's medical log was fired and named as a co-conspirator. Dr. Logan Pierce, once a terrified whistleblower, was now the prosecution's star witness. A week later, Rebecca handed me the new keys to my house. I walked in, alone, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. The air was stale, but it was mine. Maddie's things were gone, removed by court order. I stood in the middle of the living room, quiet. My gaze fell on the coffee table. There it was. The beige cardboard box. The junk. I had never opened it. I hadn't been able to. Now. I sat in my armchair, pulled the box onto my lap, and lifted the lid. His watch. His wallet. His keys. The smell of his cologne. Faint and heartbreaking. And beneath it all, Daniel's financial ledger, the one I had hidden, which proved he had no debt. I had been planning to use it in the trial, but there was something else. Tucked into the side pocket of the ledger was a small, silver USB flash drive. A piece of tape was wrapped around it, with 5 words scrawled in Daniel's familiar, neat handwriting. "If something happens to me." My heart stopped. I fumbled for my laptop, my fingers suddenly cold and clumsy. I plugged it in. There was only one file, a video. I clicked it. Daniel's face filled the screen. He looked tired, older than I remembered. He was whispering. "Hi, Mom," he said, and tried to smile. I feel crazy even making this. But I have to." He looked over his shoulder. "It's Maddie. The pills she's giving me. The supplements. They're making me sick. I feel so foggy all the time. I tried to stop taking them. And she got so angry. She's been talking about money. A lot. About a loan I never took out." He leaned in, his eyes finding mine through the lens. "If you're watching this, Mom, it means I didn't. It means I wasn't just being paranoid. Don't trust her. Don't trust any papers she gives you. Don't let her touch the house. Whatever you do. Mum. His voice broke. Don't let her get away with it. The criminal trial was a media circus. Every seat in the main courtroom was filled. Reporters lined the back wall, notebooks out, updating their live feeds. Maddie sat at the defense table, pale and thin, charged with felony insurance fraud, severe elder abuse, and obstruction of justice. Her expensive lawyer was gone, replaced by a flustered public defender who looked overwhelmed. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Alves, saved Daniel's video for her opening salvo. She dimmed the courtroom lights. My son's face filled the massive screen. We heard his voice, tired and shaking. Hi, Mum. I feel crazy even making this, but I have to. My hand gripped the armrest of the bench so hard my knuckles were white. It was agony to hear his voice again, but it was also a validation, a final, loving warning sent from across the void. If you're watching this, Mum, it means I wasn't just being paranoid. Don't trust her. Maddie leaped from her chair, screaming. It's a fake. They faked it. She faked it. But her own defender couldn't stop the next witness, the DA's digital forensics expert. He testified, in dry, precise terms, that the video file was authentic, unaltered, and that its creation timestamp matched, to the hour, the records of Daniel's first visit to the ER for dizziness and confusion. The prosecution's next witness was Vince. He slouched onto the stand, looking annoyed. He had taken a plea deal. He calmly detailed Maddie's debts. She owed me over $50,000, he said. She said it was no problem. She was getting a huge insurance payout, plus the sale of the old lady's house. Alves asked. Was she concerned about the homeowner? Vince actually laughed. No, she said, and I quote, "The old lady doesn't even know what day it is. It's easy." Maddie's defense tried. They tried to blame Northgate. They tried to blame the hospital. But the chain of evidence Rebecca and the DA had built was a steel trap. The antipsychotic pills, the lab reports, the altered system logs, Dr. Logan Pierce's clear, unwavering testimony, Dr. Marsh's ashamed confession, and finally, Daniel's own voice from the grave. The net was closed. Before sentencing, I was permitted to give my victim impact statement. I walked to the podium, not with a wheelchair, but on my own 2 feet. I looked at the jury, then at the judge, and finally, I looked directly at Maddie. I held the small cardboard box in my hands. The day I buried my only son, I began, my voice clear and strong. My daughter-in-law looked at me as I wept over his grave, and she said, "Stop crying and take your junk." I told them about the nights of confusion, the pills that weren't pills, the terror of being told I was losing my mind, of being locked away in a home where Maddie had instructed the nurses to drug me into silence. I finished. She thought I was just a confused old woman, a piece of junk to be disposed of. Today, I brought my junk to this courtroom, all the small, broken pieces of truth that she thought I was too old and too weak to hold on to. The judge read the verdict. Guilty, on all counts. He looked down at Maddie, his face etched with contempt. This court finds your actions to be a grotesque violation of trust and human decency. He sentenced her to 20 years in the state penitentiary. He ordered full financial restitution. He formally, and for the record, declared all guardianship petitions null and void, stating, This court recognizes Mrs. Eleanor Brooks as fully competent and the sole rightful owner of all her property. A bailiff moved behind Maddie, taking her arms to cuff her. Her head snapped toward me. The mask of dignity was gone, replaced by a raw, terrifying look of pure hatred, mingled with the stark, animal panic of a cornered rat. I did not flinch. I did not say a word. I just looked back at her, lifted the cardboard box from the podium, and held it tightly to my chest. It was the only answer needed. I walked out of the courthouse alone. Rebecca and Logan had given me space. I stopped on the top step, breathing in the cold, clear Westbridge air. The sky was a sharp, brilliant blue. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. A long, deep breath that filled my lungs for the first time in months. An ache of oxygen and finality. I hadn't gotten Daniel back. No victory could ever do that. But I had gotten myself back. That night, I sat in my armchair. The house was silent, but it was a peaceful silence. I opened my laptop and played the video one last time. Daniel's face looked back at me, his eyes full of worry. I heard his voice. "Whatever you do, Mum, don't let anyone silence you." I watched it to the end. Then I closed the laptop. I leaned my head back, closed my eyes, and whispered to the empty room. "Rest now. Daniel, I did my part." The screen went black, leaving the room in a thick, heavy quiet. But the despair was gone. Justice was done. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you're listening from today, so we can all connect and share our thoughts. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.